trash talking in esports, it's quite common. Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences?
I guess trash talking in esports, everyone kind of, I think it gets a bit, people take it a bit too far, I think. Sure, a little bit of trash talk, if someone's just saying, hey, you missed that shot or something, that's all right, just friendly banter. But sometimes it does get a bit too far. Sometimes just in public servers, people are just really ripping into people, just new players coming in, and it just hurts the community as a whole. In forums, everyone's just ripping into people sometimes, and in the end, it hurts the esports community as a whole. Sponsors don't want to invest their money into that kind of community, and people don't really realize what a few words can actually do.
So Celia, you've got quite an extensive background in dealing with issues like this.
Yeah.
What have you incorporated into the Iron Ribbon framework to help with the situations like Spachala's described?
Well, I mean, I see a lot of discussion in the media and amongst the community about what the problem is, but very rarely do we see something which actually addresses the solution. And I think I come from a psychology background, so a very diagnostic background. So the question is, what is the problem and why is it an issue and what's causing it? And it's about addressing those positive behaviours that actually exist within the community, but actually go quite silent. That people don't all talk to each other negatively. There is a lot of great stuff happening in the online community. And in the positive psychology area of academia, there's a lot of focus on the good and the wellness and the positive benefits that can come from it. So it's about coming up with a proactive solution, action steps that people can actually take on a day-to-day basis.
A lot of people will put this down to freedom of speech. That is the thing that is used.
Yeah.
Why can't I say what I want to people on the internet? It's their fault if they're getting offended.
Well, look, the freedom of speech thing comes up all the time. And if you actually look at freedom of speech, and I'm not going to get all technical, but ultimately you can say whatever you want, but it comes with the responsibility of standing up for what you just said. So the whole thing is, I use this analogy all the time. It's like being in traffic and you're never going to see that car in front of you again, and you're sitting there with the windows up and you're just venting like crazy. No one else can hear you, and that's that sort of thing. People think online that no one else can hear me. I'm just sitting here with my headphones on in my bedroom and no one can hear me. But that's not true. Everyone can hear you. And if you imagine if someone put a little spy camera in your car and then just heard all the terrible things that you were saying in traffic, for 3 hours in traffic on your way home, I'm sure you don't want that on the internet. And that's exactly the same sort of thing that we've got going on here. Say what you want, but you've got to be able to sort of take responsibility for the reactions of what you've said, and that's it. I think what we talk about a lot is this idea of the digital bystander. There's a lot of sort of talk about bullying in schools and things like that, and this idea of the bystander effect. Well, the reality is that online there's a hell of a lot of digital bystanders that, you hear someone venting in a 20-player game or a 10-player game and no one says anything. And that not saying anything is basically approval for that person because they're not hearing any sort of counter-argument in that environment. So what Iron Ribbon's all about is saying, hey, look, stand up for those people. Don't be a digital bystander. Get involved because there is a massive silent majority there ready to back you. And a part of the Iron Ribbon pledge is, I'm not going to, is basically, supporting your friends online. It's in there. It's built in with all of the little 5 points. So yeah, that's what it's all about. Freedom of speech is, we're not obviously not against freedom of speech, but what we are is it needs to be the right speech. And if you are going to make a big point, you need to be able to back yourself. So yeah.
The pro gamers are kind of seen as role models. Do you think that there is a responsibility that rests upon them to set the example, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. I think any new player, they always look up to the professional players as their role models. And I think not just in my community, but just every esport community, there are people who are doing it right, and there's also people who are doing it wrong. They kind of they don't really, understand how much of a role model they are, how much all these new players are looking up to them. So it's really important for professional players to really uphold their values and become the proper role model. Because the thing is, sometimes you get professional players who are just talking down on new players, but it's the new players that you want to nurture to become, so that you can grow the community and bring them up to be professional players as well. I mean, the more professional players we have, the bigger Australian esports is going to get. So yeah, that's what we need.
So, Cecilia, do you think that that's where something like Iron Ribbon comes in, by setting a framework of standards that people should be aiming to uphold in professional situations, and that will filter down into everyday gamers?
Absolutely. So the way that we designed it is that it's a twofold approach. So I genuinely think that we're all leaders in our own right. I don't think that leadership is a position of authority, it's a behaviour. You exhibit leadership behaviour every day, and we all get opportunities to do it, but we just choose not to. And leadership is risky. I mean, often we have to step beyond what's normal and step outside of the boundary, and we have to push people beyond their comfort level to say, you know what, I'm going to stand for this even though you don't. And I have a vision for the way that gaming is going to be, or the way that this game is going to be played, let alone the industry, that may be in contrast to the way that everybody else sees it. That's leadership. So we want to see it peer-to-peer. We want to see individuals within the games to be able to have the tools and the words, with Iron Ribbon in it. And it can be as simple as, flashing your Iron Ribbon pledge and saying, this is what I stand for as a gamer. If you want to play with me, then that's my standard. You don't even necessarily need to point out to that person what it is that they did wrong or anything like that. I do think that's why people remain silent. They don't know what to say, and they don't know how to say it. Yeah. This is a new frontier of social behaviour that we haven't quite got right yet, and I think this is how it's gotten the way that it's gotten.
I've been silent myself. I've jumped online. I very rarely play online with randoms these days because I'll jump off for a session, suddenly get hit. Rape threats, death threats, comments about everything, and it's. I just want to play. I just want to have fun.
And what do you say?
But what do you say?
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to do in those situations.
Well, if you're playing with a bunch of gamers who sign the Iron Ribbon pledge, you call them to back you up.
Look,
it's as simple as that. You go, did you sign the pledge or not? And our philosophy around this is that, you know what, we all say dumb stuff. Things fall out of our mouths that we wish we could put back in. It doesn't make you a bad person. It means you made a mistake. And it's okay for your friends to pull you up on that behaviour, but it's not okay for them to call you a racist or a fascist or a slut or anything like that. It is about the behaviour, it's not about the character.
It's about drawing that line as well. I mean, the idea of friendly banter in a game, right? Pull your head in, you're not playing very well, or, get the hell away from that barrier, or whatever it happens to be. But then as soon as it becomes personal, as soon as it becomes an attack on your gender, your race, your skin colour, whatever it is, your intelligence level, all that sort of stuff, that's not in-game stuff that you can't really hold someone against in-game, And I think that's where it is. It's about understanding when the line's been crossed. Of course, you can imagine in the sporting field, all sorts of things are said on the field that no one knows about. But then as soon as the line's been crossed, next thing you know, it's in the papers, and that's what it's all about. Cricket and all these sports that are all genuinely, of course, there's a level of banter going on the field. But then as soon as the line gets crossed and everybody knows it's unacceptable.
Everyone knows where the line is.
Well, that's it, because they appreciate where the line is. And the thing is, with internet culture, the line's gone. And the idea is that we bring the line back.
Yeah.
And the other thing about sort of, professional esports teams, and even clubs wanting to be semi-pro, you've really got to, you're not going to get the big sponsors, right? You're like the big sponsors like Intel and, Cooler Master and these guys, they're not going to sponsor a team that's a liability. So it's the whole thing about, come on guys, if you want to grow up and if you want to, get involved with this sort of thing, you've got to pull your level of conduct up in line.
I've encountered some discussions where people have been talking about having LANs set up as sports in schools and teaching kids online etiquette from an early age. Do you guys think that doing something like that would be a good idea?
Yeah, look, I think that teaching people real world online etiquette in that scenario sounds pretty good. And to be honest, that's the first time I've heard of it. I have heard of schools doing things like, this is how you use Facebook, go and turn all your privacy settings on, and that's just preventative. That's not even remotely teaching people how to behave online. And I think, this is a real world thing. The internet is almost like Second Life for everyone. It is. Let's call it is. and people don't know how to behave in that world. And I think that, the next generation, they say that, our parents were sort of the TV generation, we're the digital native generation. The next generation coming through have been playing games before they can read. You see it everyone's playing tablet games. These kids are 4 and 5. They're going to expect a hell of a lot more from the internet and the community that's on the internet. And I think that's, it's sort of our responsibility to sort of whip it into shape a little. What we see a lot is too often, and it's sad, is just that someone unleashes against someone they expect never to see again, and then that there's no closure, right? There's no like, oh hey, I was just joking or whatever. One of the YouTubers who jumped on board with Iron Ribbon, Luton, he has a UK YouTube channel. Very similar thing happened where he was getting a couple of YouTube comments pointing out dodgy accent, go home, get off the internet type stuff. And when he approached those people, he actually said, hey man, look, what's wrong with my voice? Like, why is it that you don't like what I'm saying? And they all backed down. They were like, you know what? I don't actually have anything wrong. I don't have an opinion about your voice. I just did it just for a joke. And it's if Luton hadn't gone and pursued that closure, he wouldn't have got it. And that's the sort of thing. So it's the sort of thing where what happens on the field stays in the field, everyone shakes hands afterwards and it's all done. But that doesn't happen with online games. People sort of just quit halfway through a game and they've had enough. And then that's damaging for that individual. They're at home and they're sort of thinking, I'm not going to play that game anymore because it's a bad experience. And that's the sort of thing that we're trying to get over here. There's a line, you've got to be aware when you cross it. Players relying on this sort of omnipotent moderator to step in and, is not the best. What you want is the players themselves to know that the line's been crossed and to hold that person up. I had someone on the Iron Ribbon, at Facebook or maybe our own website say, the counter argument was along the lines of, you say that professional sports players on the football field don't get away with it, so why should we? But if I'm playing basketball on my street with my neighbours and I say whatever, and that's not an argument, because if you unleash your neighbour on the street, there's going to be consequences, right? And
your mum's going to come down there.
And those consequences aren't going to come from your mum. Those consequences are going to come from the players that are in that game with you. And that's the thing. Developers don't need to invent new devices and triggers and switches and invent new job roles and moderators if the players themselves sort it out.
I completely agree. I completely agree with that. That self-moderation is key, and that's probably going to be the biggest factor. But there are people who you can't stop. So I do feel that, maybe that could be part of self-moderation, where people go, okay, well, we've obviously talked to this person, they're not listening to us and they're still continuing their behaviour. That's where we have to talk to someone else.
And you've got like an organised group that are out to get you, right? Which is, it's a tough place to be.
Do you feel that it is a waste of effort for the victims to be not proactive? So it's a waste of, there shouldn't be education as well for not taking things personally, and you should completely be proactive as well?
I just have one sentence to that. It's never the victim's fault.
We are very lucky people that we're in positions where we can actually talk like this, and we don't have something like, say, a professional background or a cultural background, or even if we're just scared to talk about it. We are so lucky that we can do this. There's a million people in the world who get this every day and they, for whatever reason, can't do it. And I think that's kind of our job. That's why I think we're all here, isn't it? To kind of stick up for them and say, okay, well, this person can't stand up for themselves, but I can at least try and promote good behaviour for them in the future.
Yeah, and look, there are so many facets of the gaming community, right? It's diverse as hell. There's groups here, all different levels of skill and experience. You need to be proactive, of course, everyone does, but it's never the victim's fault at all. And I think that's where it comes from. And I think calling it out, like saying, hey, that's personal, you've crossed the line, that sort of stuff, you're totally in your rights to do that. And then resulting backlash is what it is. But then you can feel better because you pointed out that they crossed that line.
So it's up to us as the people who observe it, because by observing it and staying silent, you're condoning it, basically. But by observing it and saying something about it, whether it be to the victim, it doesn't necessarily have to be to the person who's doing it. It can be saying to the victim, I think you're worth more than this. I think you deserve better. Not, I think you should do something about this and I'll back you up if you decide to take action. But, I believe that you deserve respect. Yeah. And that person may be a tool, but there were another 18 people in that game, or however many people, who did not feel that way. So it may be as simple as that, and making that victim feel less overwhelmed. But definitely doesn't have to be an outright attack on the person who's perpetrated it, because chances are that person's probably got some sort of issues going on in the background as well. They may be hurting themselves, they may be victims of bullying themselves. It's not necessarily a bad person on the end of the line, it's a person behaving in a bad way.
They might not even know what they're doing wrong.
They may not even know that they've necessarily offended somebody or even hurt their feelings.
There can be that issue of the rite of passage. There can be that issue of the rite of passage. Like, when I first started playing this game, I got harassed, and now I'm dishing it out to other people. And it's about breaking that down, breaking down that sort of culture of, like, you got to weather the storm in order to be a true worthy player. Like, that needs to just die.